On Easter Monday, the 24th of April 1916, roughly 1,200 Irish Republicans seized strategic buildings across Dublin, proclaiming an independent Irish Republic, whilst Britain remained committed to the Western Front. The insurrection lasted 6 days, ending in military defeat but marking the beginning of Ireland's final separation from British rule. To reconstruct these events visually, this video uses AI-generated imagery based on contemporary photographs, military surveys, and eyewitness documentation from Easter week. The reconstructions are interpretive, anchored in the available record, and small inconsistencies may appear. This approach allows us to walk through Dublin as it stood in April 1916, tracing the positions held, the streets fought over, and the districts reduced by artillery. This is the account of those 6 days, the decades of tension that preceded the rising, the unfolding of the rebellion across Dublin's streets and strong points, the British military response that brought field guns and a gunboat onto the capital, and the executions that transformed public opinion. What began as an unpopular revolt became the catalyst for Irish independence. The Acts of Union in 1800 dissolved Dublin's Parliament and bound Ireland directly to Westminster, abolishing what limited self-governance had existed. Over the century that followed, this legislative union proved less a partnership than a mechanism of control, and successive generations watched constitutional reform founder on British indifference or active hostility. The Great Famine of the 1840s, which claimed over 1 million lives and drove another million into diaspora, intensified a bitterness that parliamentary politics could not address. Rebellion followed rebellion. Robert Emmet's doomed rising in 1803, the Young Ireland Revolt of 1848, the Fenian Insurrection of 1867, all collapsed under superior force, yet each contributed a martyrology that fed the next. By the 1880s, Charles Stewart Parnell's Irish Parliamentary Party pursued Home Rule through Westminster itself, and twice bills reached Parliament, in 1886 and 1893, only to fail. A third bill, introduced in 1912, finally passed through the Commons after decades of constitutional agitation. Yet when the war began in August 1914, Westminster suspended the legislation indefinitely, and the promised autonomy receded once more into an indeterminate future. For many younger Republicans, the pattern was exhausted. A century of patience had yielded only delay, and Dublin's streets would soon bear witness to a different answer. In September 1914, whilst the first offensives of the Great War began tearing through Europe, the Supreme Council of the Irish Republican Brotherhood met in Dublin and arrived at a singular conclusion. Britain's difficulty was Ireland's opportunity. The war, they reasoned, would not last indefinitely, and any rising must occur before its end. Two men, Tom Clarke and Sean Mockdear Madagh, received responsibility for planning, and by May 1915 they had assembled a military council consisting initially of 3 others: Patrick Pearse, Joseph Plunkett and A.Y. Moncant. The council operated in absolute secrecy, concealing its existence and intentions even from the Irish Volunteers' Chief of Staff, who opposed rebellion without British provocation. Across the Atlantic, negotiations proceeded with Berlin. Germany agreed to deliver 20,000 rifles, 1 million rounds of ammunition and explosives aboard a vessel disguised as a Norwegian merchant ship. From America, Clan na Gael arranged approximately $100,000 in funding. In January 1916, the Council persuaded James Connolly, commander of the Irish Citizen Army, to join the conspiracy as its 6th member, with Thomas MacDonagh added as the 7th shortly thereafter. The rising was formally scheduled for Easter Sunday. The 7 men understood the arithmetic. 12,000 volunteers stood under arms by early 1916, yet the British garrison in Ireland numbered substantially more. The Council did not seek military victory, but a symbolic act of armed defiance that might reawaken separatist sentiment across the country. In the final days before Easter, the rising the military council had spent 18 months preparing began to unravel in fragments. On the 19th of April, Joseph Plunkett presented a document to senior officers at a Dublin meeting purporting to detail British plans for mass arrests of volunteer leadership and suppression of the organisation. The Castle document, as it became known, convinced several moderates that preemptive action had become necessary. It was entirely forged. The German arms shipment, upon which the entire plan depended, arrived early off the Kerry coast on Good Friday, the 21st of April. No volunteers appeared at the rendezvous. The Royal Navy intercepted the SS Libau within hours, and its captain scuttled the vessel with 20,000 rifles and 1 million rounds aboard. British Naval Intelligence Room 40 had decrypted the wireless messages detailing the shipment days earlier. That same morning, Roger Casement landed at Bannostrand from German submarine U-19 and was captured shortly thereafter. When Ian McNeill learnt of the lost arms and Casement's arrest, he issued a countermanding order cancelling all volunteer actions planned for Easter Sunday. The order appeared in Sunday morning newspapers across Ireland. The Military Council convened that same morning and, despite the collapse of every logistical element, decided to proceed on Easter Monday, the 24th. Patrick Pearse was elected President and Commander-in-Chief of the Irish Republic that would be proclaimed the following day. 72 hours of compounding failure had reduced the planned nationwide insurrection to a Dublin-centred action stripped of weapons, external support and the majority of its intended participants. Shortly after dawn on Easter Monday, the 24th of April 1916, roughly 1,200 Irish volunteers and members of the Irish Citizen Army began gathering at assembly points across Dublin. McNeill's countermanding order had reduced the mobilisation to barely 1/5 of the force the Military Council had expected. Those who appeared did so knowing the rising would proceed regardless, and that the odds had shifted substantially against them. At midday, the first groups moved on their objectives. A battalion of 400 under James Connolly and Patrick Pearse advanced on the General Post Office on O'Connell Street, Dublin's central thoroughfare. The building was secured within minutes, and 2 flags were raised above the portico, one bearing the words Irish Republic, the other green with a harp. Shortly after, Pearse stepped outside and read aloud the proclamation of the Irish Republic to a sparse and largely indifferent crowd. From within the GPO, the first radio transmission of an independent Ireland was broadcast in Morse code. Across the city, rebel columns occupied the Four Courts, Jacob's Factory, Boland's Mill and the South Dublin Union. An attempt was made on Dublin Castle, the seat of British administration, where a police sentry was shot dead at the gate. The castle, lightly defended, could have been taken, but the column withdrew. By evening, 5 major positions were held. The die was cast. If reconstructing events like this matters to you, consider becoming a channel member. Your support allows the careful research and visualization that documenting these moments requires. We will now turn to the days that followed. By Tuesday evening, Lord Wimborne had declared martial law and passed civil authority to Brigadier General William Lowe, whose available garrison numbered barely 1,200 troops. Within 72 hours, reinforcements from the Curragh camp in Britain swelled British forces to over 16,000 men, supported by 18-pounder field artillery positioned at Trinity College and FIB's Bureau, and the gunboat Helga, which sailed up the Liffey on Wednesday morning to shell Liberty Hall. On the same day, reinforcements landing at Kingstown, now Dunlawgare, Dunleer advanced towards the city centre and met concentrated resistance at Mount Street Bridge. 17 volunteers held the canal crossing for 9 hours, inflicting 240 casualties as British troops advanced barely 300 yards. It was the costliest engagement of the week for Crown forces. By Thursday, British artillery had begun systematically bombarding rebel positions along O'Connell Street and BOH Land's Mill, setting whole terraces ablaze. At North King Street, near the Four Courts, the South Staffordshire Regiment fought through barricaded houses and sniper fire, advancing only 150 yards across 3 days at a cost of 11 dead and 28 wounded. Enraged by losses, British troops broke into civilian homes and summarily executed 15 unarmed men accused of being rebels. Elsewhere, Captain Bowen Colthurst at Portobello Barracks murdered 6 civilians, including the pacifist writer Francis Sheehy Skeffington. He would later be found guilty but insane. Of the 485 who died during Easter week, 260 were civilians, many killed by British shelling in densely packed residential districts. The artillery that broke the rising also shattered the tenements surrounding it. On the morning of Saturday, the 29th of April, from the improvised headquarters in Moore Street, Patrick Pearse issued an unconditional surrender to prevent further civilian deaths. Elizabeth O'Farrell carried the order to the remaining garrisons across Dublin, and by Sunday evening, the 6 days of fighting had ceased. The toll was substantial: 485 dead, amongst them 260 civilians and over 2,600 wounded. Approximately 3,500 prisoners were taken into custody, with 1,800 sent directly to internment camps in Britain. The courts-martial began at once. Between the 3rd and 12th of May, 16 of the rising's leaders were executed by firing squad in the yard of Kilmainham Jail. James Connolly, unable to stand from wounds sustained during the fighting, was tied to a chair before the volley. The executions, carried out across 10 consecutive days, transformed public sentiment. Where many Dubliners had initially viewed the rebels with hostility, the protracted nature of the shootings turned opinion sharply towards sympathy. In the general election of December 1918, Sinn Féin secured 73 of 105 Irish seats. The military failure had become the foundational moment of independence. Beginning in May 1916, 16 leaders were executed by firing squad following courts-martial, carried out over 10 days, that transformed Irish public opinion from hostility toward the rebels to outright support for independence. In the December 1918 general election, Sinn Féin won 73 of 105 Irish seats in a landslide victory that ended 50 years of constitutional nationalism. The first Dáil convened in January 1919, declared independence, and initiated the War of Independence that culminated in the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 and the establishment of the Irish Free State the following year. 6 days of military failure had become the foundational moment of modern Irish independence. The Rising remained politically unpopular until British reprisals made martyrs of its leaders, proving that in Ireland's long struggle for self-determination, the manner of defeat mattered far more than the fact of it.